let's start off, obviously, with the new England manager. Lars, were you expecting this?
No, I was not. I was expecting this about as much as I was expecting your French accent today, Dalton. Is how I would put that. And I welcome it. I think you should do much more of the show in accents, Dalton. I'm all here for that. I think, like a lot of other people, I was kind of expecting the FA to go. Maybe not the exact same route at last time, as in promoting the under-21s coach, but someone who is seen as being more connected to the English coaching path and the St. George's and all of that stuff, which, of course, there's been quite a lot of anxiety in the British press over the last couple of days. Like, do we not have good coaches anymore? Is the pathway not working? I think going for a big name, but also a big name specialist who even has like a reputation for being a bit difficult to manage. I think that's kind of brave in a sense. Like that he's definitely not a malleable figure from the FA Blazers point of view. And I kind of like it. As a rule, I'm a little bit suspicious and skeptical of big name coaches from the club game moving into international football, because international football is so different from club football. So they've kind of made their name in a sphere and working in a certain way. And then on the back of that, they're hired to work in a very, very different way. That always, I'm never sure about that. But I think there are particular reasons why I kind of like Tuchel for international management, which we'll get into. But the big thing is, I think he's someone who has shown throughout his career that he can be quite flexible tactically, that he can work with what he has. His Mainz team was kind of famous for adapting to the opposition and changing formation a lot and sort of being adjustable. And at PSG, when he got them to the Champions League final, he showed a lot of pragmatism in the way he set them up. And really the only coach who's managed to get PSG that far in the Champions League during their sort of nonsense Galactico era. And of course at Chelsea, he came in and took over a team that had been very chaotic under Frank Lampard and just immediately got them organized. Not necessarily playing amazing swashbuckling football, but looked at what he had at his disposal and got that team organized and made it hard to beat. So I just like the fact that he's not just a systems guy who has an ideology and a way of setting up a team, and that's what's brought him to success. He has had to do different things under different circumstances, and I think that's a good sign that he might transition well into international management.
His most recent coaching position, though, Andy, was at Bayern Munich. How did that work out?
Well, you know what, Dalton? We'd need a separate podcast to talk about how it went at Bayern Munich, because he was only there for a touch over a year and what I think probably like 14, 15 months of active service.
Is there a question mark there as to why he only lasted that long?
Yeah, I think there is, because there are two ways of looking at it. I have a lot of sympathy for a lot of the problems that Thomas Tuchel encountered at Bayern, because a lot of them were inherited problems that were not his fault. Uneven recruitment, giving him a not perfect squad to work with. The defensive problems that Julian Nagelsmann had, Hansi Flick had, which are connected to that recruitment. Now, of course, the way that they got over that is, 3 months into him taking charge, they said, oh, actually, it's so chaotic upstairs. Maybe you have more of a hand in the transfers, which obviously was a part of how it unravelled at Chelsea as well. And so he had a big hand in the Harry Kane signing, as he was very keen to underline during his introductory press conference with England as well. So clearly the transfer market bit of it is going to have no relevance at international level. And as well, I think we can't judge him for a lot of the stuff that went wrong. Of course, he won one Bundesliga championship at Bayern, which they shouldn't have won, which Dortmund pretty much gift wrapped for them on the final day, and then came nowhere near last season. Although I thought they were quite interesting in the Champions League, but he didn't do anything to calm the chaos at Bayern. I think that's what you can say, and they were so incredibly unpredictable on the pitch. Lars talked about him being adaptable, and on the whole, my concerns about Tuchel as England manager would be more sort of off the pitch ones, more how you deal with the media and all that sort of stuff, where we'll come into how he did that at Bayern, which is, again, a whole nother story on its own, really. But if we're talking strictly about the tactics side of it, you know, you think Bayern is the best squad that he'd had since PSG, and he played in like quite a cavalier fashion. Now, of course, that's what Lee Carsley has just been torn out for in the game against Greece, the too many cooks thing. Something that a lot of England fans have been calling for ages, and who knew? It didn't work. I think the fact that he can be... Tuchel is someone who, tactically, especially in the Champions League, got it right, really right on a few occasions. You think of how they diminished Bukayo Saka's influence when Bayern played Arsenal, for example, last season, and that's because he doubled up with Mazraoui and Rafael Guerrero on that left-hand side. And that to me feels like a very vintage Tuchel idea. On the other hand, we talk about Southgate not being decisive enough in making changes. Often with Bayern, Tuchel was decisive but too early, a little bit impetuously, would go for it a little bit too early and leave the team a bit open.
What went wrong at Chelsea then, Lars? Because he didn't last long there either.
I mean, those were very odd circumstances. I mean, he came in around halfway through a season, knocked the team into shape, won the Champions League. And then the next season was the season when Chelsea became a frozen asset, essentially, which is, again, I don't think enough was made of how humiliating that was for the Premier League to have one of their prize clubs effectively confiscated because the owner was found to be a close friend of Vladimir Putin. And it's very embarrassing for everyone involved, and should have been a wake-up call for English football about, like, are we a little bit lax about who we let own clubs in this country? But it was not a wake-up call for that. We were continuing to do the exact same thing they've been doing for ages. Anyway, things were not going great before that, though. I mean, it was the season when he apparently pushed to have Romelu Lukaku brought back to English football, and Lukaku did not have a happy time at Chelsea, and then made the situation worse by giving a slightly ill-advised interview, I guess, in Italy, where he kind of talked about how he wasn't that keen on going to Chelsea anyway. So there was a lot of mess going around, and by the time, you know, and things were not going well, and City were running away with it. And there was a sense, and I want to get onto this a little bit, because Tuchel was so, like, charming and fresh-faced and lovely at his first press conference, because that has been a pattern of his. Yeah. After Dortmund, where he kind of fell out with pretty much everyone, he got a reputation for being very difficult. And then he turned up at PSG, and in the beginning, we were hearing, like, journalists from the French media going, why did you say that this guy is so difficult? He's so nice, because he was. And then, as time went on, he became increasingly less nice to deal with. And there was a hint to that at Chelsea as well. When he first came in, you know, his door was always open, you know, the players really got on with him. And then as the time went on and the results kind of went in the wrong direction, the vibes were deteriorated a little bit. And I do... Yeah, and that is something that seems to have happened. In the end, he left Chelsea because his views on how to run the club did not align with those of Todd Bowley and the new ownership group. Now, that might not necessarily be a strike against him. I think that might be the exact opposite. But there is a sense that because he's a very demanding character, he's quite an emotional character. He sets, you know, he expects very high standards. He has maybe worn out his surroundings, in the clubs he's been at. Now, this is where I think, again, international football might suit him. Whereas a lot of club coaches go into international football and really struggle with the idea that they don't see the team every single day. You don't have all this time to work with them. Maybe in Tuchel, it will help sort of smooth the edges of some of his tendencies to get on people's nerves and fall out with people. Maybe
less time to fall out.
Yeah, the idea of just having a camp, and then less time to throw out and fall out, and you have a camp where Tuchel can be Tuchel and can use his methods and behave the way he behaves, and then everyone goes away and they have a break from all this, and then they come back with renewed energy, and everyone has had time to reflect on what happened in the last camp. And you know, I think this could work. I think this kind of makes sense to me.
The timescale thing is really important there that Lars is talking about, and how the sense that Tuchel is there for a good time rather than a long time. But it's where England are at the moment. And Marcus pointed this out on when the Ramble did it on Wednesday. And if you haven't listened to that, I would advise you to listen. It's a really interesting discussion from the fellas about it. But the thing that Marcus pointed out is the fact that there is this weight on England of there is this set of players that you have to win something with. And whether that's realistic or whether it's perceived or whatever, the fact is that feeling is there, and that is what has pushed them towards Thomas Tuchel. Not so much Mr. Right as Mr. Right now, because you need this short, sharp shot. Basically, if he can do what he did at Chelsea, as Lars was saying, and push them to that Champions League equivalent, so the World Cup in England's case. I mean, I've rarely seen a team tightened up like that Chelsea team was that he took over in 2021. The discipline there was amazing. The way they got after teams, how physical they were absolutely insatiable. Now, they were definitely the best team in the back half of that Champions League, and I know Manchester City fans have issues with the final and whatever. But the fact is, Chelsea deserved to win that Champions League, and Tuchel was the main protagonist behind that. But when we're talking about that capacity to combust, I think we have to go back to looking at the most recent case study we've got, which is Bayern Munich. And I think Bayern Munich and England is quite a good comparison because, okay, one's a club, one's a country, but on the other hand, they're comparable jobs in the sense that every reaction is hyperbole. Every little micro move is treated as a huge thing. And little things can turn into big things really, really quickly. Now, that is something that I feel he quite struggled to manage at Bayern. Now, whether you think that they had the team to go and, be better than Leverkusen or win the Champions League or whatever, it's not an entirely moot point. But separately from that, Tuchel heaped a lot of pressure on himself from the way that he behaved in press conferences and the way that he behaved in interviews. Now, part of that is he sort of shared quite honestly his view on the chaos, which I think you've got to be smarter than that when you're the coach of like a really, really big football team. So they would say, what went wrong today? And he's like, I don't know. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you saying that? And, they went and lost at Bochum last season. He said, I thought we were unlucky if you look at the numbers. You can't say that. You just lost at Bochum. What are you talking about? And then he said, he said to our friend Archie Rintut, actually, during one game, I think it was early in the season, last season against Leipzig, Archie said to him, did the players not get the plan at the beginning? And he said, well, maybe if they didn't get the plan, maybe it was a shit plan. And it's like, yeah, fine. But maybe this is the sort of stuff you should be saying in the dressing room, not to us. If you can imagine any one of those things, and there were normally 3 or 4 of them in every press conference at Bayern last season, even one of those things is a massive deal if you say it in front of the English press that will be used as a stick to beat him for quite a long time. Now, of course, going back to what we were originally saying, it's an 18-month contract. All he has to do, and he knows all he has to do, is win the World Cup. It's a pretty simple thing transactionally, isn't it?
18 months, but look at the pattern that's emerging in terms of his duration at clubs. Bayern Munich, we've talked about. Chelsea, we've talked about. PSG, what went wrong there?
Well, I mean, again, he just sort of eventually fell out with people because of not winning the Champions League, although, as Lars said, he got them closer than anyone really in the modern era. I think if we're looking for reasons why Tuchel would work, like PSG is a huge part of it, actually, because you go from Emery, who is an unbelievable coach, and I'm sure a lot of people would think, Emery would be a great England manager, but Emery didn't really click with the biggest names. Tuchel did. And Tuchel did without really having a playing career of sorts, but he got on great with Neymar. He got on great with Kylian Mbappe. And to be able to command that sort of respect from the off, to be able to stimulate big players of differing personalities is super important.
He gets on well with Harry Kane. And
well, I'd get on well with him if he bet the farm on buying me and then said, you know what, like it's your team. You go for it. I mean, it was, if you just indulge me for a minute, when the Los Angeles Clippers signed James Harden last year, someone said to him, how are you, a superstar, going to fit into this team of superstars tactically? And he went, system, I am the system. And obviously he's widely mocked for that, and rightly so. But that's what Harry Kane was for Bayern under Thomas Tuchel. Now, I guess, Lars, the question is he capable of being that a year on and at international level?
Yeah, no, that's a question for sure. And I just kind of want to pick up the thing you said about the press conferences, because that's something that has been lurking at the back of my mind this week. Because I, broadly speaking, like this appointment. If you look at England's last few tournaments, again, the record is very impressive under Southgate after the team having been a bit of a joke internationally, like not qualifying for stuff, losing to Iceland, doing weird stuff like this. They've now, in 4 tournaments, they've reached 1 quarterfinal, 1 semi-final, and 2 finals. Like, that's very consistent. That's very impressive.
Yeah.
But what they haven't done is get it over the line. And the thing that I think, for all as much as I don't think Southgate is sufficiently appreciated in his own country, the thing you could criticize him for, I think with some justification, is in-game management in these sort of key games. And that is maybe where Tuchel would add a little bit of extra expertise. But maybe we're underestimating... I think we're underestimating a lot of what Gareth Southgate did with England, and definitely his ability to maneuver the sort of minefield of every single England press conference is something we've started to take for granted, because Southgate has been there for so long and he's dealt with all this nonsense so well. Maybe not convinced Tuchel will do the same. And I just think there's been quite a lot of talk this week about how he will have the personality and strength of character to make big decisions and drop players that need to be dropped. He himself, I thought, foreshadowed that a little bit when he was presented by saying, "I will pick the best team, not necessarily the best players." That is something he said, and I think that was a little bit of like, 1 or 2 of your favorites aren't going to be in the team, England. This is just how it's going to work. But I am very much looking forward to seeing how those press conferences go when the media darling of the month is not in the team for reasons that are entirely logical to Thomas Tuchel, but maybe not entirely logical to the brave men and women of Fleet Street who are in the press conference and have very strident opinions on this. I'm not sure he doesn't suffer fools, and that's been brought up as a positive. He doesn't suffer fools in the dressing room, but he also doesn't suffer fools in the press conferences, and I do wonder how that will pan out sometimes.
It's a good question, because they do say that the Germans don't have a sense of humour, Andy, except this week might have been an exception to that rule.
Well, I mean, I think this week has shown you that it's a nonsense rule. It's a nonsense statement, because the German media have really enjoyed this. They've really, really enjoyed this. And obviously they're enjoying the possibility of, as a couple of people have framed it, it was definitely framed like this in Bild. Can you imagine Julian Nagelsmann and Germany beating Thomas Tuchel and England in the final of the World Cup? That being one of them. Yeah. Maybe one of them wrote with England hitting the bar and the ball hitting the line in the penalty shootout.
They had to bring that up,
They're definitely over it, though. They're definitely over it.
Unlike the
ball.
ball.
Not sure about that. Yes, well...